Hello, lovely people. Welcome to the first book chat of 2021, in which I am accompanied by the little fairy muse. Not looking too pleased about it, but is she ever? So, how are you doing? How has your new year started? If you're in the UK, you'll have started in lockdown, um, which, yeah, it, it was bound to happen. I don't think any of us thought it wouldn't, but that doesn't necessarily make it any easier. And yeah, everyone's tired. It's dark. The days are short. We can't get outside as much. It's difficult. So I hope whatever you're doing, you're looking after yourselves. And the same goes wherever you are, whether you're in lockdown or not, whatever's happening in your particular country. I hope that, yeah, the start of 2021 has been a time where you've actually made sure that you are doing what you need to do in order to stay healthy in every aspect. So, yeah. Okay, so what I thought I'd talk about today is I have obviously been very slack on my book chat vids. I don't think I've done one since the end of October. Uh, and as we know, with my memory, that's not great. I'll have forgotten most of the books I read. So what I thought I'd do is I thought I'd talk about my favourite reads of 2020, because I discovered some fantastic new to me authors, and also revisited some old favourites and that sort of thing. So I decided that would be how we would start the year, as I would look at the good books I read last year. I will not mention all the books. Well, I'm about to mention right now all the books I didn't finish, or that I put down, or the ones that I rage read. Do you do this, lovely people, where you are so exasperated with the book and it's just you're furious with it, but you have to finish it anyway to make sure it's just as bad as you think it is? I did this with one book, and that basically the only reason I finished it was there was a plot point that I'd already worked out, and I just thought this cannot be what the author is planning, because it's really just not nice and it's meant to be funny, but it's just disturbing. And I was right. That was the plot point, and I really shouldn't have kept reading the book, because I now have that in my head and I will never be rid of it. So that's good. So, lesson from that: don't rage read. If the book's making you angry, push it down. um, okay, so on to the books that did not make me angry. Um, Although, actually, while we're on that, what does make you put a book down? Because that was really weird, because that was one where I was, the writing was okay, the characters were okay, and I basically read it because I wanted to be proved wrong about what I'd thought about the plot, but unfortunately I was proved right. The rest of my DNFs for the year, or that wasn't a DNF, my DNFs for the year have mostly been, um, the plot just wasn't, it was too slow, I couldn't get into it, I didn't like the characters, that sort of thing. I DNF'd one recently because there was just some really weird description going on. It was really distracting. It was, she looked outside and brushed the street with her eyes. And you just have to stop and you go, she brushed it with her eyes. And then, if you've got my imagination, there's all sorts of things going on there. That shouldn't be happening with eyes. Really, it shouldn't. You shouldn't be brushing things with them. So yeah, that one just pulled me out of the story so much that in the end I had to give up. Another one I DNF'd because within about the first 5 pages, it had come across as sizist, sexist, and racist, and I was like, well, do I give it another 5 pages and see if it can hit, a bit of homophobia as well? But I decided I wouldn't. Wasn't really worth it. So yeah, let me know below what makes you DNF a book, or what's been one spectacular book this year that you've either rage read and finished, or that you've DNF'd with so much energy that you kind of wanted to throw it across the room, but you wouldn't do that because it's a book or a Kindle, and you don't want to do that. Okay, so all right, on to the good books. Okay, so the first one I'm going to mention is, anyone who's been following me for a while knows I love my middle grade books. I find them so fun. I find YA to quite often be a bit too angsty and love triangle-y, and just, I'm not big on romance anyway, so yeah, they don't tend to be my favourite sort of books. Middle grade, on the other hand, I love, because it tends to have lots of emphasis on friendship, and there's lots of adventure, and there's lots of humour and all sorts of fun things happening, certainly in the fantasy side. So, loved Percy Jackson. But this series, or trilogy, Magnus Chase. Okay, so this is based around um, sort of Norse mythology. As with Percy Jackson, these gods have kind of been transplanted to the US, and it was just such a fantastic series. I loved it even more than Percy Jackson. Um, the main character, whose name I have now forgotten because I read them at the start of the year, Magnus Chase. Sorry, of course it's Magnus Chase. That's really shocking. Yeah, you can tell I haven't done a video for a while. And also I haven't had enough tea this morning. Okay, so Magnus Chase is this, rather than being sort of Percy Jackson, who's just automatically a really good fighter, he's a healer. And this comes across, he's not particularly, he doesn't really like getting into fights. He's quite nervous about things. He's been homeless. He's just this really interesting character that I really, really liked. One of the other main characters is gender fluid, which was fantastic. Another main character is Muslim, and yet still tangled up with the whole Valhalla gods. It was just a really good, fun read with a much more diverse cast, and I just thought it was fantastic. I loved the series. Normal Rick Riordan, loads of humor, loads of adventure, loads of action, and yet pure escapism. Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to go through my paperbacks first. Favorite nonfiction of the year. I actually didn't read a lot of nonfiction this year. I read for a lot of escapism. I tend to anyway, but this year, yeah, I really did. I don't know if you found your reading patterns changing as well. And yeah, let me know down below if you did, if you found that you were reading maybe more nonfiction because you were trying to learn more about what was going on, or whether you went the other way as I did, because I was like, I'm reading enough news already. I don't need to know any more reality. However, Darren Brown, Happy. And I actually borrowed this from the library when the libraries were still open, and I loved it so much I had to buy myself a copy, because it's just a really excellent book. I mean, I don't really know much about Darren Brown. I knew he was an illusionist or magician, whichever one it is, but that was it. I'd never actually even seen his shows or anything. But it just sounded like such an interesting book. And it was. It's based all around Stoic philosophy, and it's his sort of interpretation of it. It's quite dense. It takes some getting through. It took me about 2 weeks to read it, I think, when I got it. But then that's why I wanted my own copy, so I can go back and dip in and out. I quite like Stoicism. It's I've sort of, having read this, I've been reading other books on it, and I've subscribed to a website called the Daily Stoic, and it's a really interesting philosophy which I think is really useful at the moment as well, because it's quite realistic and down to earth and doable, and it's not. I think we tend to think of someone stoic as being very kind of just solid and unemotional, and it's not. There is a lot of realism involved, but there's also just there's joy in that as well. Um, and yeah, I thought that was very, very good. So excellent if you're interested in Stoic philosophy at all, or just learning more about philosophy in general, because it's a good place to start. But be prepared to wade. It's going to take a while. Okay, so next one. Going back to one of my favourite authors again, who actually I haven't read for ages, and I'm probably going to pronounce his name wrong, China Meevil. This book was spectacular. I loved every moment of it, and I wish there were more, and I particularly wish that there was a certain policewoman that we learned more about, because she was fantastic. She was such a great character. So Kraken. I had to teach myself how to pronounce it properly, because I've still been calling it kraken for 40 odd years. And basically it's an end of the world one. There's all these doomsday cults in London, and they're always talking that the end of the world is going to come, but this time it actually is, by the look of things, and it all hinges around this kraken that's been stolen from the British Natural History Museum. The main character isn't hugely engaging, and if you're not into big slabs of descriptive text, not for you, because China Meevil is not he does not stint on those sort of things. He's a bit long-winded, but I love it, and I find his description absolutely beautiful and very, very immersive. And that was kind of the experience of the book for me. Plus, good humor in it as well. It was funny, it was clever, it was inventive, and yes, very heavy on the description. So if that's not your thing, don't do that one. Okay, last paperback I'm going to talk about, and this is one from really early in the year, and it's probably up there with one of my favorite books ever. Absolutely beautiful. Matt Haig, The Humans, and it's the first one of his that I've ever read, and I just fell in love with it. It was funny, it was gentle, it was loving. Um, it's sort of it's looking at humans from an alien's perspective, essentially, as the alien learns. He's been sent undercover, and he learns about humans, and so there's this initial like shock of just how kind of gross and disgusting we are, because we're completely unlike the alien. um, but then this slow understanding of all the weird quirks and foibles of human nature, and how our absolute illogicness, not a word, but I'm going to use it anyway, um, just forms that humanity. And it's beautiful. And it was a fantastic read. And if you haven't read it, I highly, highly recommend it. The Humans by Matt Haig. Oh, this is fun. I like going back and looking at my favourite reads rather than thinking about my rage reads. I should do this more often. Okay, onto the Kindle, if I can turn it on. So, this is where I discovered a couple of, and Matt Haig was new to me, author as well, but here's a couple more. So, first one, Lindsay Buroka. So, Sinister Magic, the first of the Death Before Dragons series. Fantastic. Absolute romp. The main character, Val, is brilliant. She's funny, she's smart, she's got this telepathic tiger, who comes from another dimension to help her out when she calls him. And essentially she works for the FBI, but she deals with sort of magical issues. It's the first of quite a long series arc. I've only read the first two books, but I will be reading the rest because, yeah, fantastic. Lots of action, lots of humor. There is some romance in there, but it's the kind of level that I can cope with, where it doesn't take things over. And even when Val's kind of getting a bit keen on this guy who's actually a dragon, she's actually thinking, well, I could kill someone for him, and he might be impressed. And so it's not waiting to be rescued by anyone or anything like that. So yeah, thought that was brilliant. I have tried one of her other series. I grabbed a box set of hers, but it's more heavier on the romance and more, this is urban fantasy, and it was more straight fantasy, which I'm not as much of a fan of. I always kind of like where fantasy is mixing with our everyday world that we know. That's just personal taste. Still really well written, great characters, good humor. So yeah, she's a fantastic writer. So one of my new faves. Okay, so next author who I absolutely fell in love with, and these books were just so brilliant, T. Kingfisher, who also writes as Ursula Vernon, and this is sort of a 2-book series. I don't know, duology, I guess. Set all in a fantasy world, but still absolutely captivated me. Fantastic character development, really interesting storyline, really interesting fantasy world that she'd created. Very little bit steampunky, very different. I really, really enjoyed it. Basically, you've got these 3 complete misfits. They're all criminals, and they're being sent to try and find out who's sending these clockwork engines out, which are slowly destroying this kingdom. And essentially they're expected to die when they do it, but if they don't die, they'll get a full pardon. So off they go, and it's their quest to discover what's happening that takes over these 2 books. Yeah, very funny, very clever, fantastically well written. Absolutely loved them. Will be reading more of her books. She also does gorgeous art, and so that's on my birthday list. Yeah, I'm easy to buy for. Just look at what books I'm reading. Okay, so T. Kingfisher. Also really worth following her on Twitter if you're on Twitter. Very funny. Okay, where are we? Another new to me author. Done quite well on those this year. Theodora Goss. This isn't like one of my top reads, but I'm mentioning it as like kind of an honourable mention because it was very good and it was very well done, and it was a delightful book. I think that's the best way I can put it. I enjoyed every minute of it. So, The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter. There's 2 more in the series, which I haven't read yet, but again, I probably will. I'm terrible at that. I read one and go, oh, I love them. I need to get all the rest. And then it's like, oh, new book, go shiny. um, and I'll also give this one an honorable mention as well because it stuck in my head. It wasn't my favorite book of the year. It wasn't one that I'd absolutely. Sorry, I'm trying to find the cover. It wasn't one that I'd recommend unreservedly. But as far as world building and scene setting, really stuck with me. And again, it's a duology, and I've read both of them. First one was probably better, and that's Chuck Wendig, The Blue Blazers. Um, just awesome. Yeah, there's basically hell is underneath, or the underworld is underneath New York City. And there's these pigments which you can take, which will allow you to see all the creatures that are sort of coming out of the underworld, or if you go into the underworld, you'll be able to see them, whereas we wouldn't normally. Um, and yeah, just the concept of it was really, really good, and it felt quite fresh and new and interesting. This world that it created, and so I did, yeah, really, I did. I enjoyed the world building. The story was kind of interesting. The main character was an odd one, but yeah, that definitely deserves an honorable mention as a book that's definitely stuck with me, particularly the scenes that he created. Um, so yes, obviously I'm incapable of choosing a favorite book of the year, but if I had to, it would either be The Humans or Clockwork Engines. Yeah, that was really, really good. So yeah, let me know below, what have your favorite reads of 2020 been? Do you have any favorite reads? How have your reading patterns changed through this really weird period that we're going through? I don't want to say year because obviously we're into 2021 and things are still pretty weird. um, and yeah, most of all, I really hope you're looking after yourselves, lovely people. I know there's always that hope as we roll into a new year that things are going to change and things are going to be fresher and things are going to be different. Um, but I think we've got a bit of pushing through to do still before we get to the point where things actually start feeling like we're climbing out of the sort of madness of last year. So I just really hope you're looking after yourselves. I hope you're doing what you need to do to stay safe and stay healthy. And yeah, if you're stuck at home and you're not getting out and you're not seeing people, my messages are always open. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you know where to find me, or comment below. Okay, so take care of you. I hope you got loads of good books in. Let me know what your favourites have been, and if you've read any of these ones, what you thought of them. And we shall see you next time. Thanks for watching.